Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the third part thereof for the 17th of January 2025. We're going to start with some kind of European-centric geopolitics concerning the war in Ukraine. German Foreign Minister criticises her government's hesitancy on Ukraine support. There's been an interesting dynamic going on recently where you've got Annalena Baerbock of the Green Party, who's a foreign minister in a coalition with Olaf Scholz's SDP, and they are at loggerheads to some degree, although it appears that Boris Pistorius and Annalena Baerbock, I think, agree. So Boris Pistorius is of Scholz's party, and there's some issue to do with them wanting maybe $3 billion or euros worth of support for Ukraine, and then Scholz is trying to be a bit more cautious given the election is coming up and so on and so forth. But Annalena Baerbock seems to be coming out of this really with her head held high in terms of Ukraine at any rate. I don't know her domestic politics particularly, but she has been absolutely forthright in her support for Ukraine. And I think she's holding a lot of currency there. Now, she confronts the government's cautious approach, highlighting internal divisions and political disagreements over funding mechanisms amid the election campaign. Really strong from her. Now, you got Robert Fico. You were shocked. Why don't you forgive? Zelensky tells Fico. So what Fico has said in his pro-Russian stance aligned with, who was it? Where was it from? We heard recently is like, why can't you forget? It came from Lex Friedman, wasn't it? With the interview with Zelensky, that 3-hour interview where he was like, why can't you forgive Russia? And you've got Fico saying similar things. And Zelensky says, well, you were shot. Why don't you forgive? Ouch. There's been this really public spat between Zelensky and Fico. Zelensky tells Fico that, drawing parallels to Russian aggression, the Slovak government is playing a very dangerous game by criticising military support for Ukraine and getting closer to Russia, President Zelensky has said. I like that. I think Robert Fico needs to be called out. It's like, how are you getting on with forgiving the guy that tried to kill you? We've got people trying to kill us all the time, every day. Bombs, missiles, tanks, howitzers, guns, humans. Should we just forgive them and let them welcome them into our country? Europe is buying Russian gas at an unprecedented rate in 2025. So in the first 15 days of the year, the EU's 27 countries imported 837,300 metric tons of liquefied natural gas from Russia. This marks a record high, up from the 760,100 tons bought during the same period last year. Despite sanctions pressure, 95% comes from Yamal under long-term contracts. So this is a difficult one because actually it's not just on-the-spot buying and like, should we go and buy that cheekily from Russia? No. This is stuff that could well be under contract. So that was the issue with oil and gas going through Ukraine. Ukraine was able to turn off the gas on 1st of January, travelling through Ukraine, because it's the end of the contract. So we're just not turning it back on. But actually there's a bit of an issue with what they're going to do with oil going through Ukraine, because that is still under contract. And so you might say, it's very easy to just shut this down, but then you can get caught up in legal ramifications and court cases whereby Russia, in some sense might have the right to say, hang on, you've signed a contract to buy our gas, liquefied natural gas, for the next 10 years. You can't just stop now. It depends what the small print is in the contract as to whether you can stop due to the fact that Russia's just become a bunch of bastards starting war on their neighbours. So be interesting to see how this develops as sanctions are ramping up against Russia, but there still is this ability for Europe to buy huge amounts of Russian hydrocarbons. Deeply frustrating. Now, in case you're wondering who the bad guys were, the president of Iran has arrived in Moscow for an official visit. He will meet with Putin and they will sign a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement between Russia and Iran. And I wonder if it looked similar to what was signed between Russia and North Korea, that has seen North Korean troops fight in Kursk on behalf of the Russians. I mean, as Anne Applebaum rightly points out, this is autocracy Inc., and birds of a feather flock together. Now, we're hearing that Russian hackers are targeting WhatsApp in a new tactic. According to Microsoft, the Russian hackers group Star Blizzard impersonated US government officials in attempts to gain access to WhatsApp accounts and sensitive information. And I believe that NGOs are being targeted there, particularly, definitely a worry for security. And speaking of which, Russian diplomats breached a restricted area of the UK Parliament before Christmas. A small group joined a tour, then split off and entered the House of Lords chamber. Security swiftly removed them, and MPs have now been warned not to invite Russian diplomats. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. Absolutely incredible. I don't think there was any worry about them finding anything out. I think this was a bit of a stunt for the Russians, really. But that is absolutely not cool, and a stop needs to be put to that happening again. And what do we have? So we've got David Lammy, the Foreign Minister for the UK, says, I just thought this is interesting, not particularly to do with Ukraine, but worthy of debate. David Lammy's answer is to make the FCDO the international delivery arm of the Prime Minister's twin goals of expanding the economy and cutting immigration. So two things the UK needs to do at the moment is grow the economy. That's a real challenge given the economic landscape at the moment in the UK. And they need to cut immigration, which of course might affect economic growth, like we talked about with the US. But it's something they absolutely need to do if they want to temper the mood of some people who, really want Reform UK, really worried about immigration in the UK. And Labour need to be seen to be dealing with those sentiments and issues of immigration. And Lammy sees two practical use cases of AI. So artificial intelligence. One is to help draft briefings for diplomats. The more ambitious is to combine in-house files with open source data to analyze a counterpart's vulnerabilities and interests ahead of a negotiation. So this is the bit that I was more interested in talking about. So part of the economic growth that the UK has been talking about in the last week, because I recognise, they're in trouble, and Labour need to come up with a way of getting around the stagnation with the UK economy. A lot of people saying getting closer to Europe should be and could be the answer. One of the things that they've touted is embracing AI to try and drive economic growth. And there are lots of worries with AI, but also lots of opportunities. There are many unknowns, and you could get a bit Luddite about this, which is, will AI replace people, and therefore, productivity will go down, or at least, the amount of employment needed, but like human employment needed, will go down because we'll be replaced by AI, etc., etc. So, these opportunities come with potential threats attached to them. But the idea that I'm sure we can see AI being harnessed in the open source intelligence community with like the ability to go through huge amounts of videos to see whether there are duplicates and stuff like that. AI is going to become part of, it already is part of our economies and realities, and it will only be more so as time goes on. And I guess the UK is saying, look, we want to keep ahead of the curve. Be interesting to see how it changes societies going forward, and also in the context of the war, how much effect AI will have on the Ukraine war. Right, we're going to go to things pertaining to the US and Ukraine. We're going to start with a Reuters article. Trump, the savior, anxious Ukrainians answer president's power. Anxious Ukrainians question president's power to end the war. And Trump has promised to end the war in Ukraine quickly, although that he's already gone back on that promise. And as I said recently, 100 days, 6 months, many months, maybe this year, all sorts of different timeframes now being applied, even by Trump and his own team, to resolving the war in Ukraine. Russia's Putin has signaled willingness to talk, and Kyiv pushes for US guarantees behind any peace deal. But people in Ukraine are themselves somewhat dubious as to really what Trump is going to achieve. A poll found that 31% of respondents expected the war to go on for years, and another 31 said it was difficult to say. So there's not many people in agreement that Trump's going to sort this out quickly, from people in Ukraine who might have a pretty good sense of what's going on and what they believe. And the question is whether they are going to be able to be rushed into a quick negotiation that is a suboptimal negotiation. But Antony Blinken, the outgoing Secretary of State, has said, quote, the new administration led by Trump has the necessary prerequisites. In other words, we have given them everything they need to help Ukraine conclude a good agreement to end the war and establish lasting peace. So he's saying, look, they've got everything they need. Whether they will bring the negotiations to a conclusion where a good agreement is in place is another thing. But, so Antony Blinken is saying, but, we've done our job here. The Biden administration has handed you all the tools. It's up to you now to bring this to a just and strategically beneficial conclusion. Of course, you can disagree with that. But Zelensky has stated that the US, Hungary, Slovakia, and Germany oppose Ukraine joining NATO, as I repeated yesterday. But it's interesting that you put Hungary and Slovakia with Germany and the US. He revealed Ukraine spent $100 billion on the war in 2022, and he's in talks with France and Poland on peacekeepers. He stressed Ukraine's need for strong security guarantees, and that's going to be the absolute key to negotiations, the security guarantees. Now, I'm going to revisit what's happened with Mike Turner. He was the Republican chair of the Intelligence Committee. I think this is absolutely terrible, and it's a sure sign of what's going on, but also quite fascinating to watch. So Speaker Mike Johnson has removed Mike Turner as chair of the Intelligence Committee. The MAGA wing of the Republican Party opposed Turner's continuation in the role. Turner, a Republican, is known for his pro-Ukrainian stance, consistently advocating for continued aid, right? There was this claim. Turner said it came from Mar-a-Lago. I think Mike Johnson has tried to say otherwise, but Turner's the one that's like, I was told by Mike Johnson this has come from basically from Mar-a-Lago, which the insinuation being from Trump. But actually, like I said yesterday, I don't think Trump is going to be deciding on things like this. I think this comes from his team, and I'm worried enough about Trump. But like I've said before, Trump is an empty vessel. I don't think Trump really has much ideology. I think the people around Trump can fill Trump up with whatever you like. And he'll just go out and broadly say that. He very much has a proximity bias where he says he's big on the last person that spoke to him. And he'll say stuff that parrots that. And then he goes back to kind of default. But the default is usually, what the people around him are saying and continue to say on a consistent basis. So I think Mike Johnson and Trump are getting rid of Mike Turner on the behest of these people. I don't know who these people exactly are. You can talk about, Stephen Miller. It's obviously not Steve Bannon. He's not close enough these days, although it would fit in line with the kind of Steve Bannon approach to the world. But it's these people who are pro-MAGA, but, pro-isolationism and anti-Ukraine. You hear the rhetoric of Donald Trump Jr., his son, and Elon Musk, and you're wondering, is Elon Musk? We hear that he's going to have an office in the White House now as an unelected bureaucrat, as a plutocrat, as an oligarch. We're in a deeply worrying situation, and I'm going to do a video a little bit later where we look at Biden's farewell speech, basically, where he's talking about disinformation and oligarchy. And you've got this spike of people searching for the term oligarchy because they've heard Biden say it and they're actually looking into it. And you've had Bernie Sanders being saying this since 1993, standing up and talking about how the US is tending towards an oligarchy. And he said that every year since. And actually in 2014, there was a report that came out to say, yep, the US is now officially an oligarchy, and you're getting this greater and greater move towards that, and where now, you've got the richest cabinet, you've got the richest administration, you've got stacked full of billionaires. At his inauguration, Trump is going to have Bezos, Musk, I presume Tim Cook, the guy from OpenAI, Mark Zuckerberg, they're all going to be sitting with him. And if you are an American going, yeah, I voted for this because I'm the little guy and I want Trump to look out for me, he will not. If you look at his tax cuts, in fact, let's go into that now just rather briefly. But if you look at what's going on, so the question is, and this is pertinent to Ukraine and Russia, because I see this as a fight for democracy against autocracy. And if the US is one of the biggest allies of Ukraine and is now starting to tend towards autocracy, and all these decisions are getting made are decisions that are for the benefit of those in power, and those in power are oligarchs, then the US is starting to look more like Russia than Ukraine. And Ukraine is trying to think, well, what's our beacon of light around here? What are we aiming to be? Because it's probably not looking like the US at the moment. So the question, and this is really important for wherever you sit on the political spectrum, listen to this, please. If you're a big fan of Trump or if you're a big fan of the Democrats, listen to this. The question, this is abductive reasoning in philosophy, which is the inference to the best explanation. In other words, like, let's be really simplistic here and say there's a kind of a binary option. Like, the binary option is this is a decision that is best suited for a government who's really trying to strive towards free and fair democratic ideals and a representation of the whole country, and to make the country a better place for all of the United States? Or is this decision a decision that is made for the self-aggrandizement of the administration, that gives the administration more power, more money, more wealth, and so on and so forth? So you've got these kind of two options. And yeah, I am simplifying it to this binary. And the question is, okay, with each, and you can say, oh, okay, for the Biden administration, the Chips and Science Act, or the infrastructure bills, or the Inflation Reduction Act, who is this for the benefit of? Is it lining the pockets of X, Y, and Z, or is this to try and build up the economy, to make it more sustainable? You know, who is this? Is this to the benefit of Joe Biden? You look at all the policies that Joe Biden put in place, and this is going to sound a bit pro-Biden here, but essentially it's like, well, the policies he's trying to put in place to the benefit of Joe Biden. So when you look at Vladimir Putin, and you're thinking he's taking money out of all of the natural resources and out of all the privatized, now oligarchic entities around, like Gazprom and this and that. The idea is he's the richest man in the world because actually everything that gets done inside the Kremlin is to the benefit of Vladimir Putin. So the question is, going forward with the Trump administration, and you can compare that to the Biden administration, who is this benefiting? Honestly, ask this question of everything that happens, the 100 executive orders that come out on day one of Trump's administration. Ask yourself, with each of those executive orders, who really benefits here? Who is this actually to the benefit of? Who will the American people benefit the most? And which American people will benefit? So, as Melanie Dirigo here says, Republicans finally introduced a bill, and this is coming from the Wall Street Journal, which is a Murdoch paper, right? Republicans again introduced bills to repeal Corporate Transparency Act. So Republicans finally introduced a bill to bring down the cost of eggs by, checks notes, repealing a corporate transparency law that prevents corporations from laundering illicit money through shell companies. Nope, don't think that's going to do it. So January the 15th, 2025, a group of Republican lawmakers are attempting to repeal the Corporate Transparency Act that requires companies to disclose their true ownership, proclaiming the law a big government overreach. Who does this benefit? They are saying, this is a government overreach that we have to be transparent. So is this so you've got your two pots here. The one pot, can we put this in a pot of free and fair democracy, transparency, lack of corruption, not government lining their own pockets? That's one bucket. The other bucket is corruption, lack of transparency, lack of democracy, growing towards autocracy, self-aggrandizement of those in charge. Okay, what does this do? And then let's look at the next one. Trump's 2017 tax cuts delivered a cut for the richest 0.1% of Americans that was 277 times larger than the one teachers and firefighters got, nearly doubling US billionaire wealth, Lawmakers must prevent a repeat in 2025. So he's going to extend that tax cut and he's going to make it deeper. And from what we hear, Trump wants to cut corporates' tax rate to 15%, and this would give the 5 largest banks $4.1 billion in a tax cut, the 5 largest drug makers $3.1 billion in tax cuts, the 5 largest oil companies $2.5 billion, and the 5 largest grocery stores $1.7 billion tax cuts. Okay, these guys are already making stupendous amounts of money and profit. So who are these tax cuts benefiting? Is this a populist thing to help out the people at the bottom of society? Or is this helping out the people who are already making huge amounts of money? So with every single action that takes place going forward for the next couple of years, ask yourself, who is this benefiting? So when Mike Turner is removed from the Intelligence Committee, chair of the Intelligence Committee, who is this benefiting? I mean, to me, it looks like Putin. Well, then why is that to the benefit of the administration that's making this happen? Speaker Johnson will not make Republican Representative Mike Turner chair of the House Intelligence Committee in Congress. But it's actually worse than that, because he's actually going to be he has been turfed out of the Intelligence Committee as a whole. It's not just he's not going to be the chair, they've got rid of him. MAGA wing of the party revolted over keeping Turner in the post. Turner has also been a strong Republican supporter of aid to Ukraine. And yeah, Jamie Dupree here says Mike Turner is not only not the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, he's no longer a member of the committee. He was the speaker just named the GOP members of the panel, and Turner's name was not on the list read by the House reading clerk. This is a huge problem, I would say, and it's telling you something about what the Trump administration, where their loyalties lie. And I think my prediction is that there is, or my analysis is that there's almost certainly a bit of a tension there, where you have someone like Mike Waltz, who's a security advisor, who I don't think is super great, but he's like better than someone you could have. And then you've got Keith Kellogg, who's pretty much okay-ish on Ukraine and Russia, right? And these are like a bit more old school Republican, maybe. And they are trying their best to build up a plan for Ukraine. But then you have the MAGA cabal that is around, and this is speculation because I don't know who these people are, but it appears that they are there. As Phillips O'Brien said, this is all looking bad for Ukraine. MAGA is promoting anti-Ukraine figures. So to replace Mike Turner, you've got Rick Crawford. He's expected to be the House Intelligence Chair, who is not a fan of Ukraine, right? So you've got this tension developing between people who are going to be serious on doing something that's going to benefit the US through benefiting Ukraine and have this proper sense of the geopolitical strategies that need to be put in place. And then you've got this group of people who are just absolutely MAGA, who are wanting the people to be in place who will actually not benefit Ukraine. And there is a tension here, and that is already evident, because you've got, on the one hand, people saying things like this, not that actually. Trump's team is crafting a sanctions strategy to push for a Russian-Ukraine peace deal while tightening pressure on Iran and Venezuela. Options include raising Russia's oil price cap. I mean, I think he means lowering it, enforcing secondary sanctions and targeting oil tankers. So that's Trump's team readies oil sanctions plan for a Russia deal. So you're hearing stuff like this. Advisors to Donald Trump are crafting a wide-ranging sanction strategy to facilitate a Russia-Ukraine diplomatic accord in the coming months, says Bloomberg, while at the same time squeezing Iran and Venezuela. And you think, okay, this is good. Then you've got Scott Bessent, who's another billionaire, by the way, said the US, in his hearing, to become, he's not commerce. I mean, he's anyway. Should increase sanctions on Russian oil. Is not commerce, because that's the other guy who was wanting this job. Treasury Secretary. Yeah, of course. Scott Bessent said that the US should increase sanctions on Russian oil producers to force Moscow to negotiate with Ukraine. As he criticised the Biden administration, the comments on Thursday by Donald Trump's nominee, by the Treasury Secretary, pushed up oil prices. Okay, well, unfortunately, that's going to help Russia, to be honest. But you've got this situation where there are some sensible things being said, and then you've got some horrendous things being done, which is getting rid of Mike Turner and replacing him with a Russian MAGA voice, there is a tension going on here, and this is not good. There's not a unified voice in the Trump administration, which is why we've been wondering what the hell is going to go on, because we're hearing both sides of the story. And you hear Trump saying one thing, and then a bit later going, oh, it turns out it's more complicated, because I think he's listening to this simplistic MAGA view of the world, and then coming out and saying, oh, I'm going to solve this in one day. And then you get the old school people and the establishment who actually know what they're talking about. I'm using establishment not as a pejorative here, who's saying, actually, this is really complicated. This is why we're on Ukraine's side. These are the ins and outs of it. Here's the intelligence you need to hear about. And then Trump goes, oh, okay. Oh, this is much more complicated. Right, let's maybe get some serious people to deal with this all. And then the MAGA cabal here goes, oh, actually, no, blah, blah, blah. And then Trump goes, oh, no, okay, yeah, let's get rid of Mike Turner. And then the establishment goes, what are you doing? And then, we're going to see it go swing one way and the other. It's just, crazy. There are some ramifications to this that are fascinating. So this is a fascinating bit. Mike Turner, right, Trump said that he's got this massive mandate to run the United States, and he doesn't. He empirically doesn't. It was not a landslide victory like Trump has said, and like Mike Johnson keeps saying. It's a landslide. It's like, okay, let's have a look at the House of Representatives. Okay, there's a majority 217 to 215. Okay, that's literally as slim as you can possibly get. Right. Okay, so if we then have this fascinating situation where Mike Turner has just been essentially cast aside. And I don't think he's happy with this. And we can guess he's not happy because he's not made a single vote since he's been cast aside. Which means there are several options here. Mike Turner just doesn't vote anymore, and that 217 becomes 216. It's not that he votes for the Democrats, but he cuts that advantage from 2 to 1, which is making it even slimmer. Or he could do something funky, and lots of people are talking about this. If he joins the Dem, it doesn't actually become 216 to 215 because it's a zero-sum game. So 217 goes to 217 to 215. If he joins the other side, it becomes 216, 216, which means that you've got a split House of Representatives. So doing this to Mike Turner might have some really devastating consequences for the House of Representatives, and that advantage that is as slim as it can possibly be disappears. So if he joins the Republicans or joins the Democrats or starts caucusing with the Democrats or becomes an independent, lots of people, this thread's fascinating, lots of people saying some really interesting things like, actually, if he switches sides and then goes to Hakeem Jeffries, who's the minority speaker for the Democrats, then I don't know what happens if it becomes 216, 216, what happens with the speaker. But you could get Hakeem Jeffries putting Mike Turner as the head of the Democrats in the House Intelligence Committee, which would be something that I'm sure Mike Turner would want. He's got the expertise, he's enjoyed it. You can think of all these different scenarios whereby this is really going to hurt the Republicans. So fascinating stuff to see as to what might happen here. Or you might just get Mike Turner primaried and then another Republican coming. It depends. There are all sorts of different things. You could have people parachuted into his constituency, and then I don't know. There are all sorts of different options as to what could happen here. But him getting ditched by the Republicans could end up hurting the Republicans, and that MAGA cabal that I'm imagining here, but I think there must be something like that happening around Trump. They might end up being just a bit too naive about how the politics works. They are hugely ideological. I think you've got a Project 2025 group of people here that are so hell-bent on ideology that they're forgetting that the real politique of trying to run Congress, of trying to run the country with this trifecta, and that could be very, very unwise. But anyway, not too much more for me to say other than this. Donald Trump did not back down from threats during a conversation with Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. According to Frederiksen, so this is over the kind of military threat on Denmark, an ally, a NATO ally of the US, concerning who is going to control Greenland. According to Frederiksen, Trump reiterated the possibility of imposing tariffs if Denmark does not give up Greenland, so threatening Denmark. Quote, the US side suggested that unfortunately there might be a situation where we collaborate less with Americans in the economic sphere. We are in a serious situation. So those that say, oh, it's just bluster, don't take Trump literally. You're like, okay, well, how do we take it since he's just been on the phone to Mette Frederiksen and reiterated that to her face? Or to the phone. Russia and China couldn't be happier to see the US do itself over by picking fights with its allies. It's absolutely terrible situation there, in my opinion. This didn't need to happen. The US has got things to concentrate on. If it wants to sort out its inflation, it can go and try and do that. If it wants to sort out immigration, it can do that. This looks to be like, it's a bit like when Elon Musk picked a fight with the UK to distract people from the fact that everyone was hating on him from the MAGA camp because of his H-1B visa declarations. It was no coincidence that he did, oh, look, shiny things. It started attacking the UK, and that changed the rhetoric, and he got himself out of a problem. The US, I don't know whether this is like, oh, look, shiny things. Everyone's commenting, focusing over there, and then Trump can do all sorts of other things. But he should be concentrating on the things that he was campaigning on. He didn't campaign on invading bloody Greenland. Anyway, just mark my words. Well, not mark my words. Just do this one thing for me. Everything that happens going forward, think, is this making the US more transparent, more democratically free and fair? Is this doing something for the American population, or is this doing something for the moneyed elites? Is this something to gain more power for the Trump administration? What is each decision and each executive order? Which bucket do we put it in? Honestly, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, just have a look at that, and let's be honest with what each of these declarations and policies is trying to do. Anyway, in the meantime, take care of yourself. Thanks for watching. Take care and speak soon.